Hello, Meoni here. Welcome back to another video. This time we're talking about, yet again, another interview that has happened recently prior to the 7.4 preview on Live Letter Part 90 today, the 5th of December 2025. 4Gamer then has posted this. All rights belong to them. I'll link a link in the description of this video for you to go and support them. Please do so. But we're going to read through this because there's some interesting little bits of information as to the potential of 7.4 and beyond. So talking about class and job restrictions on Glamours finally being relaxed. 4Gamer says, thank you for joining us today. In the 7.2 interview, you talked about creating content that's even more fun when everyone plays together. And in the 7.3 interview, you talked about changing the mindset of the developers. I think they say that your new policy has taken a more concrete form as you've worked on the production of this patch. How do you feel about it? Yoshi says, thank you very much. What you just mentioned won't end with 7.4. Starting with 7.3, we're continuing to make even greater improvements and evolutions. Even if there is a next expansion pack after Golden Legacy, we won't just cram everything into it. We'll gradually introduce what we can now. For example, in 7.4, we'll implement a new user interface, the Quick panel. This is a result of our desire to make the game more user-friendly. The variant Dungeon Merchant's Tale has undergone changes from the previous versions, aiming to change and innovate the way players play and the gameplay experience. Since these efforts have only just begun, I can't say with certainty what will happen in the future... 4Gamer replies, I think the new content with each new patch is important, but at the same time, improving the gameplay experiences is also important. Yoshi says, yes, that's right. Thanks to the support of all of the Warriors of Light, we've accumulated a huge amount of content and systems over the 12 years since the rebirth. However, we believe we've reached a stage where we need to reassess our goals, not just for 7.4, but for the next 7.5 and beyond. Final Fantasy XIV has been a huge success as an MMORPG with a huge number of players. Until now, this was fine, but if we simply compare the period immediately after the release of 14 with the present, the lifestyles of our players have changed, and even our own lives have changed. The quantity and quality of entertainment content available in the world has also changed dramatically. Looking at the online game market, while the absolute number of MMOs has decreased, there are titles released since the release of Final Fantasy XIV, and the number of online RPGs on smart devices has also increased significantly. 4Gamer responds, the recent advancements in online RPG titles playable on mobile devices has been incredible. To which Yoshida replies, naturally. After playing those titles, there will be people who will want to play Final Fantasy XIV. However, when comparing a snapshot from 12 years ago with a snapshot today, I think there are clearly some aspects that are outdated. Long-time Final Fantasy XIV players may think, quote, it can't be helped since it's such a long-running title, end quote. However, not only new players, but also current players will be influenced by other titles and will encounter some aspect that cannot be explained away as it's been around for so long. Therefore, we are doing what we can now immediately. While some things may take up to 6 months, we are re-examining and confirming aspects that were previously dismissed as it can't be helped because it's the game's specifications, and making necessary improvements and adjustments. We're also considering whether it's okay for Allegan tomestones to remain displayed as 0 out of 450. Many players are asking, since our lives revolve around Allegan tomestones, is it really okay to leave things as they are, including the way they're displayed? Can't we make them more user-friendly? What must we do to ensure this title remains enjoyable in the present and future generations? Changing the Glamour Prism specifications is part of this effort. Interesting. 4Gamer says the major changes to the weapon projection, or Mirage Prism as they call it, specifications were a hot topic on X and Blue Sky after the 89th letter from a producer live, and there's pictures there of the Glamour unlock features that were shown on that live letter. Yoshi P says, we could have waited until the next Fan Fest and announced it at a keynote speech saying finally we have weapon glamours. It would also definitely be exciting. It would be another big thing for me to think about, so I feel a little more at ease. However, I said that if it would increase the degree of freedom and give players something to look forward to, then we should do it right away. As long as it makes sense, we'll do what we can immediately. In terms of our flexibility and reform, I think that in 7.3, what was only felt in the Pilgrim's Traverse content will gradually be felt throughout the entire content, including system updates starting with 7.4. 4Gamer says, I was wondering if weapon glamours weren't in the next expansion pack, but now that I've heard it, it makes sense. Yoshi says, do what you can now has always been our policy, but on the other hand, it also means changing something that has been around for 12 years. There were voices from within the team saying things like, if they're going to do that, it should be an expansion. And I never thought Yoshida would say that. While I realized that things tend to become fixed over time, I responded, if it makes everyone happy, then it's fine. That's how it's always been. 4Gamer says, it was a moment of joy for many players, but I'm sure there was some confusion too. It was a sudden change to something that hadn't been addressed for many years. Yoshi P says, I wasn't able to follow the announcement closely, but I did see the reactions from various quarters after the announcement. Some people said they're doing a great job changing a policy that's been in place for many years, while others said, Yoshida, wasn't that something you were particular about? He laughs. However, I'd like to preface this by saying that this is purely my personal opinion, and my personal policy itself has not changed. Because this is Final Fantasy as a series game, I want the Dragoon to wear that armor, hold a spear, and strike the cane stance as proof of his status. I want him to be a knight wearing full plate armor, holding a sword and shield and thinking, wow, that's cool, I want to play that too. That's what we want to aim for at the core. Honestly, that's what we want to aim for as a game, as Final Fantasy. I believe that because the development team and the operations team shared that commitment and developed the story's background with that goal in mind, we've been able to create so much content that players have come to love. However, as I mentioned earlier, I looked at the specifications of games around the world from a perspective of 12 years ago and now, and the current situation is that there are very few titles that impose such restrictions. To which 4Gamer replies, it's true that being able to wear any costume you like is the norm. Yoshi P says yes, and with the shift from free-to-play titles to the current era of microtransactions and in-game purchases, it's easier for players to purchase if you can wear or equip any character or class's gear, and it's actually more effective. It directly influences customers' purchasing desire, so I think the game design decision as a microtransaction-based business scheme is sound. As a result, it's only natural that a number of titles with such systems will increase. 4Gamer says, this ties back to what I said earlier. Players who enter online games through those systems are unfamiliar with 14's system, even though it's the same online game. Yoshi says, why can't I dress up in the gear I've purchased? I can do that in other games. They're like, it's weird for a wizard to wear armor. Roles should have their own unique style. But there are also those who say it's a game, so it's fine for them to wear what they want. We've continued the service up to this point, but I felt that it was time to entrust this commitment to our players. I personally love role-playing, and I think I'll probably set my own restrictions for each job. For example, if I'm playing my warrior, I'll only dress in my own style, he laughs. However, rather than forcing our developers' policies on players, we want to let them have their own unique style in their roleplay. If I have my own unique style, that means there will be as many unique styles as there are players. This was a major reason for our decision, to which 4Gamer says, I see. Yoshi says, the level of commercial services in general, especially the concept of common sense, is constantly being updated. I'm grateful that the development and management teams have sincerely adhered to my policies up to this point, but as a producer and director, I've once again felt the need to remain flexible myself. That's why over the past 6 months, I've been working on it with the motto, if we're going to do it, let's do it to the fullest. Let's do it in every way. I'm still working on it, so I hope you'll continue to look forward to it. We'll take your feedback and make improvements based on it. As a top game of the current generation, we want to provide a more advanced and comfortable service. 4Gamer says, I read the removal of restrictions also includes artifact equipment, but what about the unique equipment for each race? Yoshi says, in the literal sense, there will be no class, job or level restrictions. Therefore, we've managed to maintain the identity of each race as much as possible. This is because the races are intertwined with the lore of the world itself. The design also includes culture and living space, and the team asked us, what about racial equipment? We naturally decided to leave it at that for now. However, we do plan to gradually make changes to the character creation system. Interesting. 4Gamer says, what do you mean? For example, Elizan and Mikote Mooncapers can now have moles in good positions on their faces. With the graphics update, we've added more functionality on the system side, so we're considering allowing moles to be added to races that weren't previously eligible. I think we'll expand the scope of such changes in the future. However, we don't have any plans to make it possible to equip Lalafels with aura horns, and I don't think we'll do that in the future. The identity of each race is very important to our players. 4Gamer says, I'm looking forward to that. 4Gamer says, changing the subject, in a previous interview you said, we'll go back to the style of continuing the expansion story until around 0.3, then moving on to the next expansion. Please tell us what the highlights of the main quest are. Yoshi says, it's truly a story that serves as a bridge to the next stage of the story. I just finished checking everything relating to the main quest last night and sent back my feedback, and there were only 4 areas that bothered me. It's very well organized and I feel like it's going well. Thinking about how to convey this, it's very difficult, but the general flow is when I took on the new Final Fantasy XIV, I first wanted to make the protagonist feel like the protagonist. At the time, they were called the Sages or Scions, and later changed to the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. I wanted to clarify the characters' personalities and inner lives, which were previously unknown. In the main quest of the old Final Fantasy XIV, all sorts of incomprehensible things were happening right in front of a player, while the protagonist, the Warrior of Light, was merely a bystander. First, I had to put the Warrior of Light at the forefront and carefully portray each of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn characters. I worked on this from 2.0 to 2.55 and created a pattern where all of the characters would scatter and then return one by one. From Shadowbringers to Endwalker, we've been able to thoroughly portray the first half of each character's life, in a sense. I think there are still characters that haven't been fully portrayed, and that's why we're focusing on them this time. 4Gamer says, this feels like a little hint. Yoshi P says, it would be a spoiler, so I can't say too much, but this is the starting point where the story of not only a specific region, but the entire world begins to move again. I think you'll start to get the feeling that it's begun from the second half of the main quest. 4Gamer says, as the patch title suggests, the Arcadia Throne of Heaven raid series has been attracting a lot of attention since its release, thanks to its unique characters, commentary, and background music. So talking about the Arcadian raid series here, the heavyweight raid will finally be implemented. The scheduled release of Savage 3 weeks from now has also been a hot topic. Yoshi P says, first let me talk about the schedule. Last year we pushed through the release of the Cloud of Darkness at the end of the year, on December the 24th, if you didn't know. Christmas Eve raiding. For our players, he continues, we were determined to release it as soon as possible. We received a lot of anger, especially from Western players. Personally, I was overly optimistic, thinking Christmas and the end of the year are gaming heaven. Gamers will play games. I apologize. 4Gamer says, well, there are differences in culture and customs. Yoshi says, yes, Christmas is supposed to be spent with the family, but if you ignore that and play games, what kind of position do you think you're putting yourself in at home? And just looking sideways at someone playing, consider their feelings. Last time we decided to release what everyone is expecting on schedule, but we learned that it was a bad decision from a global perspective. We considered moving up the release of the patch itself, but the New Year's holiday is essential for the Japanese development and operations team, and the companies collaborating with Final Fantasy XIV will have to stop operations from around mid-December. Even if we were able to force the release, we wouldn't be able to provide support on hotfixes if something went wrong. On the other hand, postponing the release of the patch itself would be counterproductive. It's not just players of Savage who enjoy 14. That's why we decided to take this approach this time. 4Gamer says, I see. Yoshi continues, this ties back to what I said earlier, but as we continue to make changes, I think the raid release schedule turned out to be a good test. We also need to consider whether the new equipment and equipment development and upgrade methods, such as elegant tomestones, are appropriate for the current era. We're currently also discussing how to present the equipment upgrade process, and we're exploring the best option for this. If we decide that our current release policy is the best, there's a chance we won't make any major changes at all. However, if a new idea emerges that suggests this will be in this day and age, it could change. Another media outlet asked, will the release timing for the next Savage be restored? We explained it's not a question of whether to revert it or not, but rather we find the best time for that, or we'll find the best time for that, and that we've abandoned that idea entirely. We decided to announce the patch release date and Savage's release date early, considering everyone's life work and life game balance, because we didn't want to end up with people saying, I turned down all of those invitations over the New Year's holiday and made my schedule free. We hope everyone has a well-planned and enjoyable New Year's holiday. 4Gamer says, thank you. So can you tell us some of the highlights? Yoshi says the newly released Arcadian Heavyweight is of course the final installment in this raid series, but the biggest positive aspect of the series is that players have grown to love the individuality of the characters. Of course, it doesn't have as much story as the main quest, but we were able to create content on the battle side that brings out the individuality of the warriors, and we were able to incorporate commentary and background music into it. I'm proud of how beautifully we were able to portray the characters. I've had the opportunity to visit game events all over the world this year, and I'm incredibly happy to see so many people cosplaying as these warriors. 4Gamer says, I've seen it a lot on social media. Yoshi says, it's a grand finale with everyone appearing at the climax, so I'd like you to pay attention to that first. I was very particular about the truth and who the mastermind is, so I'd like you to take the time to enjoy the mystery elements that go beyond the heroic feel. Of course, we put a lot of effort into the battles, but I'd be very happy if you could pay attention to the story and how the characters come together. The release of Savage is in 3 weeks, so I hope you'll take the time to enjoy the story first. Of course, for those aiming to beat Savage early, please make sure to gear up properly before the release. 4Gamer says, I understand. This is also the sequel to Hildibrand, the Golden Saga. Translation there, which also entertains players. In a previous interview, you said everyone is really pushing the boundaries. How is the production of this one going? Yoshi says it's Hildy. He holds his head. Actually, Hildy's final check is tonight, so I can't tell if it's within the limits or not. He smiles bitterly. 4Gamer says, that's a really timely question to ask. He laughs. Yoshi says, we checked the plot beforehand, and of course we knew the overall flow, but the development team liked to exaggerate when creating Hildy. Even in Dawn of the Dead, I never expected her to start playing volleyball. It's fine to have a positive how did it happen, but we have to have to avoid a negative how did it happen. As I've said before, I told them to avoid that idea that Hildy, because she is Hildy, somehow died and came back to life. Absolutely keep the part that he's strong because he harbors superhuman spirit and hope intact. What I'm aiming for with this story is a fusion of hard-boiled and comedic. I've loved hard-boiled novels like the Philip Marlowe series since I was a student, so I'm quite particular about the boundaries of hard-boiled. There are actions that a character who claims to be hard-boiled shouldn't take, and even if they get caught up in a joke, they need to be just on the edge of being cool, he laughs. This time there are many scenes in which Hildy fires a gun, and we paid particular attention to adjusting those scenes. Pulling the trigger is not an easy act, but there needs to be a reason for it, and I think the reason needs to be conveyed to the reader to some extent. 4Gamer says, so this is a breath of fresh air for the Detective Hildibrand series, who brings laughs to players and improves the skills of the creators. Yoshi says, however, I won't know until tonight whether we manage to stay within the limits, he laughs. 4Gamer continues, they're laughing, thank you. My next question is about the new variant dungeon, they say, Merchant's Tale, which will be implemented alongside the new advanced variant dungeon and criterion systems. I believe the new system reflects a change in the development team's mindset, but how are you feeling about it so far? The distinctive visuals are also eye-catching. Yoshi responds, we've been making adjustments right up until the very end, and we certainly feel confident, but will players enjoy it when we release it to them? Until we see the reaction, even if we feel confident, we can't be completely certain. For example, in the advanced variant dungeon, will defeating the first boss feel like a fulfilling experience? With players' disposable time on the decline, we've introduced a new in-game option that allows players to choose whether to move on or to stop playing. In the initial implementation, players could control their progress by pressing the exit button to exit midway, but we felt this wasn't quite right. The new advanced variant mode offers individual rewards for defeating a boss. We've also included a prompt asking, "Do you want to continue? Do you want to mark your achievement here?" We place importance on providing meaningful content, a sense of accomplishment, and an experience that allows players to look back and say, "I've completed this much today." We're currently playing with the development team, checking and discussing each step one by one, and have just finished reviewing the advanced variant mode of the dungeon. The advanced version is designed to allow players who have already experienced the exploration of the merchant story on normal mode to challenge themselves with slightly stronger versions of the bosses they've grown accustomed to. To achieve this, we've designed it so that players can practice in any order they like and work their way through. We've also designed it so that players can steadily work their way through it over time. However, the satisfaction of defeating 3 bosses in a single challenge is absolutely essential. So we've currently included a reward for defeating 3 bosses in a row in one attempt. The content development team and I are trying to strike a balance between presentation and sense of accomplishment. But what players think of it will determine the answer. We'd love your feedback after playing. 4Gamer says, what do you think of the variant mode itself? Yoshi P says, merchant story itself is extremely well made. Putting advanced variant dungeons and criterion aside, I hope you'll enjoy the game itself. The characters are well defined and the visuals are completely different from anything we've seen before. 4Gamer says, I've heard that this is a type of visual expression never before seen in 14. I'd like to hear more about that. Yoshi P says the background or BG team worked hard. It's a bit technical, but it's like, what are you talking about? You didn't even change the shaders? You're talking about entering a picture book, he laughs. Lighting and textures are almost all of the expression techniques used in this game. Creating images from realistic textures and filters, and then showcasing them with shaders and lighting in its current generation technique for creating a sense of realism. However, this time reflections were not allowed. Since it's inside a picture book, it had to look like a solid painted-on image. Normally a cell shader would be implemented to achieve this cell look, but that wasn't included this time, so we made the material parameters solid and eliminated reflections. This meant that we couldn't add shading. As you can imagine, this meant we had no choice but to draw the shading manually. It's a PlayStation 2 generation technique. While hand-drawing shadows is a bit of a localized process, it's been a while since we've done textures almost entirely by hand, even for a Final Fantasy XIV map. Interesting. 4Gamer says, so it's hand-drawn. I see. That's a lot of effort. Wow, it really is a lot of effort. Yoshi P says, I think our experience creating Pictomancer came in handy. The VFX team had been working on the Pictomancer illustration since the last expansion, so I think the BG team was closely studying that style and the knowledge they gained. When I saw it, my first reaction was, well done. 4Gamer says, I imagine the contrast between the illustrative background and the characters was also a difficult part. Yoshi P says the character shaders are completely different and more realistic. I noticed this when I was checking them out, so I asked them to make adjustments to bring the texture of certain boss monsters closer to the original, and now they're working on it. The entire team involved worked towards the goal of letting players enter a book and journey through the world of a story. We're proud to have created content that will be thoroughly enjoyable, including the story and surprises, so we hope you'll give it a try. It can also be played solo, so the BG team will be delighted if you stop what you're doing and take a good look at the world. If you can also upload lots of screenshots, we'd also be happy. We could cry, he laughs. Oh, there will be. Oh, and he continues, that's right, if you've enjoyed the previous variant dungeon Aloha Island, we think you'll enjoy 7.4 even more. Very cool little hints there. Does that have a story background meaning? 4Gamer asks. Yoshi P says it's about the Mirara tribe, Milala, right, or Lalafels, which are mentioned in 7.0, and a large part of that is related to it. So we'll think it'll be a little bit more interesting if you play it before 7.4. Oh, interesting. 4Gamer says, I understand. Going back to the topic for a moment, on the topic, I think the visual expression this time around has benefited greatly from a graphics update. It's because the scope of what can be done has expanded. Yoshi says, that's right. Things that previously had to be done with textures can now be done with shaders and lighting. As a result, usable memory size has increased and texture size has also increased. We still hear from players that the atmosphere has changed, but the benefits are immeasurable. Merchant Story has also benefited greatly from this and is now able to achieve content that would not have been possible before. By converting everything that was previously done by hand into programmable, we can now control things like pupil size and color textures with a pick, and we plan to make things possible in the future that were previously impossible. I'm not sure if I should get ahead of myself in this interview, but please look forward to future developments. Ooh, interesting, more texture stuff. Look forward to seeing what the next expansion looks like, honestly. 4Gamer continues, I'm looking forward to seeing even more challenging graphics in the future. Next, 4Gamer asks, 7.4 will include UI updates such as a new color theme, quick panel and strategy board. While the addition of content tends to attract a lot of attention, I feel that these small updates are also important measures for the next 10 years. Very true. Yoshi P says, UI isn't something we started recently. Looking back, it dates back to the early development days of A Realm Reborn, when we came up with the cross hotbar system. That would have been around 2011. While the global standard is keyboard and mouse, we aim to make MMORPGs comfortable to play with a gamepad, which is why we felt we had to focus on the UI. With MMOs, the more in-game features you have, the more complex the UI becomes, a dilemma that has led to an increase in the number of buttons or icons. As you stream your gameplay, the public will see screens full of UI. While experienced players may be fine with it, those seeing it for the first time often think, what kind of game is this? It looks difficult. My gameplay and screenshots are sometimes released and people often wonder, even the producer and director's gameplay is like this? Yeah. It does have a tendency to look a bit busy, especially compared to modern UIs you might see in other games, right? That being said, Yoshi P continues, I think players don't really want to see a screen full of UI. We want players to enjoy their own characters and the scenery, so the less UI they see at a glance, the better. One answer to that is the quick panel. We're constantly thinking about it, constantly creating it and repeating the process. It's not something we came up with and created within the scope of a single major update. It took about 2.5 patches to plan, implement and release the quick panel. The strategy board was planned and conceptualized 2 years ago, and it took about a full 1.5 years from the time we finalized the specifications and began full-scale development. We made a major push at one point along the way, and the specifications were expanded accordingly. We've long been committed to ensuring the comfortable Final Fantasy XIV experience and preventing other titles from catching up with Final Fantasy XIV. Of course, we have no intention of stopping the evolution, so please feel free to use both the quick panel and strategy board with your own ideas. We actually look forward to your feedback after using them. 4Gamer says, thank you for today. Finally, please give us a message for our readers. Yoshi says, this time, the 8-person raid content Arcadian, the heavyweight series, will be the finale of the 7.x series. We put all our effort into creating the story, production, and battles, so we hope you'll enjoy playing it on normal mode first. For those who enjoy the particularly challenging Savage raids, the usual response is Savage is coming, so I'll just quickly finish the normal version and get some gear ready. However, with Christmas and the end of the year in between, we have some time before the Savage version is released. I hope you'll start with the normal version and take your time to see how the content is being developed. The main quest will also be releasing towards the end of the year, so please take your time and enjoy it without rushing. The climax of 7.4 will reveal the key to connecting the worlds, as well as the fate of the world and the stars beyond. I'm sure you'll get the feeling that the next adventure is coming after the summer vacation, so please look forward to it. We're also working on a new variant, Dungeon Merchant's Tale, with a goal of making it enjoyable for all types of players, from those who enjoy solo play to those who play with their families and those who enjoy hardcore battles. And with that in mind, FanFest is approaching. He laughs. 4Gamer says Final Fantasy XIV Fan Festival 2026 will be held in North America, Europe, and Japan. In Japan, it's on October the 31st to November the 1st, 2026, so just under a year. Time flies. Yoshi B says this patch also includes numerous system updates, including major changes to the quick panel, strategy board, and weapon glamours. The fun of exploring new fashions has been greatly increased, so I hope you'll take the time and enjoy the game at your own pace. I'm confident that this patch will also give you the sense of transformation and evolution of Final Fantasy XIV in the future. I've always believed that MMOs are games to play in the present while looking forward to the future, so I will continue to work hard to create something that everyone can enjoy for a long time. Thank you for your continued support. So this was posted on November the 12th, and yeah, there's some interesting bits from this. I hadn't read it before. It basically is very similar to the previous interview, but the fact that we get a little bit more information on future character customization, right? This is something they've talked about for a while. The idea that they still have limitations in place for that idea, where they don't want, you know, people to suddenly have horns on a Lalafell. It makes perfect sense, but the idea of further customization. At the end of the day, most of the races are dealing with 4 face types, which obviously is a huge limiter in terms of, you know, character customization and making your character look unique. So the more things they can do to add to that uniquity, be that the glamour system first, unlocking that and making people be more expressionist in what they wear, you know, crossing the boundaries of what's possible, you know, traditionally, compared to, you know, in the future. Hopefully we get some news at FanFest about new facial options and features. Personally, I would like to see tattoo options so that you can just apply those wherever you like. A lot of video games that you play these days, a lot of MMOs, be that, you know, Where Winds Meet or BDO, or even, you know, to some degree, some of the bigger, sort of flashier Asian MMOs, they have a lot more options for customization that I think that 14 would benefit from. But yeah, I think the mantra of keeping creative and pushing the boundaries ever forward is a very positive thing to hear. Can they deliver on it? That is the big number one question. And I'm sure that we'll see a completely different game as we evolve in the future. Hopefully 7.4 storyline helps bring some people back, right? And looking forward to 8.0. Let me know what you think about this. It is very similar to the previous interview, but I did want to post this simply because it had a few extra details that were omitted from the other interview. And yeah, it's worth putting that stuff out here if you want to read through it without reading through it if there's any differences. But yes, very excited to hear more about character customization and other planned graphical changes to the game in the future. Anyway, much love. Link in the description. Go give 4gamer.net some love and support, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.